Thank you for joining us for another episode of Techno Brew. And this time it's my pleasure to speak with a good friend of mine, Paul Hicks, who is a senior advisor at SwitchGear. Paul, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Carlos. How you doing?
Very good, very good. I'm very happy that you're on. I've been wanting to have you as a guest here for some time now. I've been following your posts. Worked with you personally back in the day, which was a lot of fun, and having a lot of fun watching what you're putting out.
Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to our time together today, and I think this will be a great conversation.
Awesome. Our topic today, we're talking about, switching gears in terms of, leadership, sales, and service, and your approach in the current post-pandemic landscape. Give me a little bit of backstory, how you got started in this, how you ended up at SwitchGear.
Totally, yeah. So I was a sales individual contributor for a couple of years early in my career, and then I moved into management and leadership. So moved into like sales manager, sales director, all the way up to sales VP. And along that journey, back in 2014, I was introduced to this company called SwitchGear, and it came into the organization I was in. I was a sales director. They brought this leadership program, and with an underlying focus on how do we become more effective at selling, more effective sellers, and how do we help buyers buy. And it had a profound impact on me personally and professionally. So I would say, the way that I communicate internally with my team, the way that I communicated with customers, and the way that I communicated outside of the office with whether it was my wife, my kids, friends, it just really elevated the way that I interacted with people. And during that time frame, one of the partners there, his name was Bruce. He said, or I said to him, if I got the opportunity to do what you do, like I think I'd find that really fulfilling. Fast forward a couple of years, I left kind of corporate life. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And Bruce had become a mentor of mine, really good friend, reached out to me and said, remember that conversation we had where you said if you had an opportunity to do what we do, it might be a great fit. Is now the time to try that? And that was late in 2017. And I jumped at the opportunity and haven't looked back since. I've loved every minute of it, being able to help frontline leaders, salespeople, service individuals elevate their game and deliver exceptional customer outcomes has been just a really fulfilling chapter in my professional life. And I'm really excited to share some of the things that I've learned along the way.
Awesome. Yeah. And I really want to dive into that, particularly how, your approach to leadership mentoring was impacted by COVID and what it looks like today.
Yeah, totally. And, maybe what I can do just to set some context is just share the story of like when I first became a sales manager and in my first move into leadership. And, I've had lots of conversations with different managers and people leaders over the years. And one of the things that's this consistent theme is when you get promoted into leadership, you go to bed Friday night and you're a highly competent, effective individual contributor. And over the weekend, somebody sprinkles some fairy dust on you and you wake up Monday morning and you're a sales manager. But you're not just a sales manager, you've got a certain level of incompetency, right? Like you don't know really what it means to be a great sales manager in most cases. What does it mean to be a sales leader? And what's your leadership style? And what are some of the pitfalls you want to avoid? And so I found that was one of the things that, SwitchGear really helped me with was defining my leadership style and recognizing the things that just shining a bright light on the blind spots that I didn't know that I had. And so, when we were all in the office together, leading teams and having really effective connected conversations, developing that cohesive culture, it was challenging enough to do that when we were in the office together. It's gotten even harder now that we're in these remote and hybrid teams, like the old adage of management by walking around. right? Like being able to walk out of your office or your cubicle and wander around the floor and to hear conversations, learning by osmosis, that's all gone. Yeah, the shift of hybrid and remote work has really drastically impacted the way leaders lead, and the playbook that many organizations have in place for leadership, managing and coaching teams, for the most part, it's gone obsolete. And I'm not sure that there's a lot of people trying to figure out what the new playbook looks like. And so that's
Yeah.
part of what I and the organization is focused on developing right now.
How do you suggest, or how have you, I guess, interacted with your clients to help them maintain that team cohesion you were talking about and that engagement while working virtually?
Yeah, so let me start by saying it is extremely challenging, and it's universal. Like every organization that is has embraced remote and hybrid work is struggling with this. And so some of the things that we really focus on during the pandemic, the big focus was just on like well-being check-ins, and how do you actually check in on your employees, the feelings of isolation, the feelings of disconnectedness from the team or from a bigger purpose within the organizational structure. So really just taking the time to connect with people in a very personal, connected way, right? Like what you and I are doing right now with a video call, picking up the phone and calling, your colleagues, your peers, your
Yeah.
employees. But since the pandemic, I've noticed this shift to where there's this infatuation with efficiency,
Mm.
and the efficiency of sending somebody a Slack message, right? Or sending somebody an instant message or a text. Hey, how's
Right.
it going? And what we get back is often very superficial. So we've actually really helped some clients figure out what are the better questions to ask, right? Better questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your day today?
Right.
Or, tell me about the best part of your day. Or what was one thing you dealt with today that you found really challenging?
Like a discovery approach when you're talking to a new client, right?
Yeah,
You're asking them open-ended questions.
that's exactly the way to think about it. I think the thing that I find myself focusing a lot on these days, and again, I'll start with my kids. And it's funny how leadership and coaching and managing, you do all those things with your kids as well. And so one of the things, like my kids now, they're all teenagers. And a lot of the conversations that I'm having with my kids in the last several years is, what are the conversations you have over a text versus over a FaceTime versus face to face together in a room?
Yeah.
And just the nuance of there, there's just knowing which medium to use for a conversation, depending on the type of conversation and the emotion attached with it, right? The emotional needs of that conversation. So I think with leaders, and again, this has just become more and more apparent in our remote and hybrid work. It's figuring out when is the right what is the right conversation to send an instant message, or what's the right conversation to send an email, or what's the right conversation to actually pick up the phone and have that live conversation, and recognizing when two or three emails have been flying back and forth between you and an employee, and they're just not getting it, or something's missing, like they're missing the point of the emails, like pick up the
Yeah.
phone. So like yeah, it takes a little bit more time,
Yeah.
but I'm always trying to help people see the balance between efficiency and effectiveness. And so that's where I think leaders are really having to utilize all the different mediums that are available to them to have really effective conversations, and knowing when to use those mediums, right? When is a video call like this appropriate versus a phone call? Because they're different. They're nuanced.
Yeah. I'm harkening back to this is a conversation I had with a mutual friend of ours, Scott Lanaway, where we talked about the importance of aligning managerial and cultural philosophies with respect to brand, because brand isn't just this um, ephemeral outward facing phenomenon. It's internal as well. Do you own it? Does your organization internally believe it. And so I feel like this type of conversation or engagement that you're promoting for your leaders to have with their team helps to foment that and really nurture that.
My perspective of culture is what you say and what you do defines your culture, from a leadership, from the top down.
Here, here.
And when we were in the office together, leaders were much more visible. They were in the office and people could hear the way they talk. They could see the way they treated people. That they could see, did their words align with their actions? And so I think it was easier to create whatever culture you created in the office. It was easier to create it and maintain it because people were actively seeing it every single day.
Yeah.
I think that organizations really need to redefine and rethink what culture means in a remote work setting, especially for teams that are 100% remote.
Yeah.
Because the culture of an organization, it doesn't extend into the home. People aren't exposed to it every single day. They're not living it. They're not being influenced by it. My direct leader, if I was a individual contributor again, my direct leader, I'm getting what, maybe 5% of the exposure I used to, maybe less.
Yeah.
So the idea of extending culture into the home, I think it's something that people really need to, number one, define, like, what do we want our remote culture to look like? How do we define it? And then managers need new tools. Like I said, like before, the way that we would install culture, it was what we said, what we did, how people observed us in the office. And
Yeah.
senior leaders could see how junior leaders were operating and they could make adjustments on the fly
Sure.
because it was in their face.
Yeah.
In our remote settings, that doesn't exist anymore.
Once a company has established what kind of a culture they want, what's the next step for them? Like how do you get that buy-in?
I think the very first thing that I look at is what is the relationship between the employee and the manager? And how often is that employee and manager connecting in group settings and individually one-on-one?
Right.
Because the reason I say that is it doesn't really matter what kind of culture you want to have or you want to install, or if you do those, everybody knows the guy who swoops in and buys pizza for the team and then swoops out. That's not what builds culture. That doesn't build employee engagement. It's the relationship and the connection they have with their immediate team and their immediate boss. And so I always start with the relationship, the one-on-one relationship. How is that defined? What are the intentional actions a manager is taking to connect with their employees? One-on-ones tend to be very management focused, right? Results. What are your challenges? How can I help? Let's do your pipeline review, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's not building the relationship. That's a very functional conversation. When I talk about building the relationship, I'm talking about the emotional needs of the employee. So when we think about people, there's always two sides of it. There's the emotional needs and the functional needs. The functional needs, what do you need to do? How do you need to do it? The emotional needs, how does it make you feel? And so that's really where we focus a lot of our time and energy, is making sure that we're uncovering the emotional needs of our employees, because everybody's are different. And then what are the specific tactics that we use to engage with that employee and not just meet, but exceed those emotional needs, so they are a fully engaged, high-performing employee on our team. I'm not sure if that answers the question or if you want to go deeper on that, but that I think is when we talk about culture, that's kind of my initial thought around it is, let's make sure that employee and manager relationship is awesome, because that's going to define or begin defining the culture of the organization.
Proactively creating touch points aside from these one-on-one functional meetings.
Right? Because so often the communication that we have, that managers have with employees, is reactive and management focused. It's adjusting, right? And part of that's because of the way organizations set up metrics and systems and reporting. It's always designed to kind of catch people not doing things, or identifying our lowest performers, because that's where we're going to spend all of our time and energy, catching people doing things really well and reinforcing that. And just the power of the positive reinforcement, you'll get so much farther down the road of engagement and employees who bring them full selves to the workforce by reinforcing those positives as a first step. I'm not saying ignore the stuff you got to adjust. You have to do that as well. So one of the things specifically that we did with a client is we built something called people first planning. And people first planning it's a frontline manager methodology, but it's about owning your time and being really prescriptive and proactive about where that time goes. And so how much time am I going to dedicate to one-on-ones versus internal meetings versus me time? How am I as a manager going to take care of my well-being? Because if I'm not in a good mental, physical state, I'm not going to be able to help others with their physical and mental state.
Right.
So that for me is a really, really big thing that I think too many managers, and again, I fell into this in my early days. I was very reactive, and I wasn't proactive enough with my calendar. So when I didn't own my calendar, somebody else did. They would fill my calendar with meetings, and I just found my time wasn't my time. I was spending my time the way other people wanted me to spend it.
And you're getting burnt out.
Yeah, totally. And I think because during the day when I should be doing my 9 to 5 job, I was doing other stuff. So I was doing my 9 to 5 from 5 to 9.
Jeez.
Right.
Yeah.
I was working evenings, I was working weekends, and it drove me nuts, and it drove my team nuts. I remember getting feedback from one of my managers about an email I sent at 11 o'clock at night. And he was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, I feel like I have to respond. And I know it's the only time you have to do your email, but like you're killing me." And that was a big wake up call for me.
Yeah. It's nice when you have those candid responses that end up being immensely helpful.
Well, and that again comes back to what I was saying earlier. He was able to have that conversation with me because we had a really strong, deeply connected personal relationship. And it was intentional on both our sides. So that's the only way you're going to get those really candid pieces of feedback is when you have this really strong employee leader relationships.
Yeah. Now people are meeting face to face. It's not quite as restrictive as it was, but it would have been quite challenging and probably still is to a certain degree with hybrid work and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. And people are getting back into the face-to-face conversations. But I would say it's at a far lower frequency than it was in the past. Pre-pandemic, I found people to be much more willing to grab, lunch, grab a drink after work, to like have that kind of personal connection throughout the sales cycle or the buying process. I think what I've noticed now is there's a lot more of the interactions are being done virtually. And again, just building on a comment I made earlier, the push for efficiency. Decision makers are busy. They've always been busy, but they've gotten busier in our virtual environment. So the sales process I'm finding is becoming much more hybrid with a very strong tilt towards the virtual. People will give you a 20-minute video call, Zoom, Teams call. They won't give you the 30-minute phone call. And the thing that I find in some of the conversations I have with sales leaders is people's ability to differentiate as a result of this shift to hybrid is disappearing, right? When we're able to meet face to face, take people golfing, go out for lunches or dinners, go out for drinks and cocktails, that had an inherent relationship building component to it. Now with the virtual setting, there's a big shift in buyers' mentalities around, I don't want to worry about building a relationship to start. You've got to deliver a ton of value to me in this first conversation. You have to provide insights, help me see things I don't see, help me uncover hidden trends that I don't or can't know about. That's that's the big shift I've noticed is it's really turning the sales profession into insight drivers. As buyers move more to the virtual setting, sellers aren't able to build as much rapport quickly. You've got 20 minutes. When you're going out for dinner, you used to spend just the first 20 minutes talking, connecting. How was your day?
Yeah.
How's the family? You don't get that opportunity anymore, especially early in the buying cycle with new prospects. So sellers really need to come to these conversations equipped with powerful insights, not the stuff that people can Google. If you're just Googling, industry trends, industry insights, and you're sharing that with people as like your big thought leadership approach,
Yeah.
people smell that from a mile away and you lose credibility almost instantly. What they want is they want the types of insights and deep understanding that people who are in the trenches solving problems every single day can bring to the table. And that's where sellers are really differentiating themselves, is when they can talk very specifically about client A was dealing with this problem. Here's how it was showing up. Here's what we did. Here's the solution we implemented. And here's the outcome that we were able to drive. Those kinds of conversations is what people are looking for, not the features and benefits and product.
Yeah.
The shift is problem focused. You need to be a problem finder more than a problem solver. And I think those are the salespeople that are the most successful in my experience, and even in my own approach with clients.
Yeah.
I've had to make this shift to really focusing on and becoming intimate with what are the challenges my clients and my ideal prospects are facing every single day, and how do I uncover those and how do I share them in a compelling way with people that they sit back and say, I feel that, but I've never heard it described that way. Or I've had to, like, you just bring a new way of looking at a problem that they either didn't know they had or had but weren't sure how to articulate.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually shift into service. So I know that's an area that you are also very passionate about, and have helped clients with their service teams. And I'm sure you've helped them to balance using AI and maintaining that human touch in the client service interaction. So what's that been like for you?
Yeah, so AI is playing a really interesting role inside service teams today. And people are still figuring out what the full potential is of AI from a service standpoint. The trend that we've seen, and it started before the pandemic, is organizations using AI in terms of pulling out the transactional, easy to solve problems that customers are calling about. Um, a question about my bill, how do I reset my password, things of that nature. And what's being left behind in the human to human interaction are the really difficult, really complex problems that oftentimes don't get solved in one interaction. And with those problems come a lot of emotions. And especially when a customer is calling back for the third, fifth, 11th time about a problem that they're trying to get solved,
Yeah.
and they've been unsuccessful in, or the service provider has been unsuccessful in solving. The first 60 seconds of that conversation really determines how that conversation is going to go. How do we acknowledge and empathize? How do we take ownership of a problem and resolve the problem effectively? And when you remember earlier, I mentioned the functional and emotional needs.
Yep.
The functional needs of a customer who calls in about a problem is fix my problem, right? Fix the problem that I've called about. The emotional needs are, I want to feel heard. I want to feel respected. Make me feel special. And when a service agent, customer service, tech support, doesn't matter, when they jump too quickly to the functional of let me solve the problem, and they don't ask enough questions, they don't empathize enough with the customer, it actually elevates the emotions inside that conversation. The
Sure.
customer
Yeah.
gets more and more frustrated. We hear things like, "You're not listening to me." No,
Yeah.
I already shared that previously. You didn't look at the notes.
Yeah.
And in the worst case, we see customers become verbally abusive towards our
Yeah.
employees. And you might
Yeah.
have seen yourself, like you go into a Starbucks, you go into a retail store, you go to a McDonald's. There are signs all over the place now that says, treat our employees with respect. We will not tolerate abusive language or the threat of physical
Yeah.
violence against employees. Those have become commonplace. And it's because early in the pandemic, we noticed customers were very empathetic towards the service provider. We do a lot of work in the telco space. Like telecommunications, your internet at home became an essential service as
Yeah.
we moved to remote work. When it's not working, early on, we found customers were empathetic towards the service agent. Like, oh, you must be having a tough day. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only person calling. Can you help me out? 18 months into the pandemic, it was just people were getting blasted. The agents were afraid to pick up the phone because every time they pick up the phone, it felt like they were going to get punched in the face. And so we really focused on those soft skills. Like, how do you empathize? How do you acknowledge? How do you de-escalate the customer emotions in the first 60 seconds so you can have an effective, productive conversation that ended
Yeah.
with a satisfied customer because their problem was resolved?
Yeah. Really, really important stuff. And I guess I'm curious how the KPIs that your clients have for their service teams have been adjusted to allow for that empathetic approach. Because average handle times tend to get shorter; they don't get longer. So if you're a really empathetic rep, but your calls are 2 times longer than John and Peter's, generally speaking, that's not a good thing. So have you seen that shift as well with your clients?
Um, I would say it depends. So we are always trying to balance the tension between efficiency and effectiveness. So you mentioned handle times. Yeah, if an agent has a handle time of say 6 minutes, and another agent has a handle time of 9 minutes, if all you're looking at is AHT, then you're going to try to tackle that 9 minute agent. Like how do we help them get it down to 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 6 minutes?
Yeah.
But you're only looking at one side of the equation. If you flip it to say, okay, what are the repeats or the first time right metrics for these agents?
Yeah.
And if the 6 minute agent has triple the repeat calls, or their first time right is half of what the 9 minute agent is, then you look at it and say, well, no, the agent that's taking 9 minutes to solve a problem, but they're solving it the first time and that customer is not calling us back. That's way better than the person who does it in 6 minutes, but that customer calls back 3 more times.
Yeah.
So it's always the balance of efficiency and effectiveness. And I think you never want to look at just one side of that equation. You got to look at both sides. So that's always our counsel is we try to take a holistic view to, we can't have conversations taking 30 minutes, but if we can do it in 9 or 10 and we avoid that, that repeat call, and we're getting a 4.8 out of 5 on the customer survey that goes out afterwards,
Yeah.
that's a really good conversation. And then just on that point, to finish off, like we worked with a telesales team. The best seller on that telesales team had a handle time that was double everybody else. They were the best seller. So there's going to be cause and effect to any change you try to make. So if you try to cut that person's handle time, their results are going to suffer potentially, right? So it's there's never one way to tackle things. You're going to increase one metric at the expense of another, or I'll say it this way: you're going to improve one metric at the expense of another. And it's just what is that trade-off you're willing to make? And unfortunately, in organizations that treat customer service teams as a cost center, a lot of the time it's going to be focused on handle time.
I want to be mindful of the time that we have.
Sure.
What do you think we can talk about that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, Carlos, I think the one thing that I would leave people with is the operating systems that worked pre-pandemic are now obsolete. We see it everywhere across our clients and just in the general conversations that we're having. The way that people would lead, manage, and coach their teams when we were in the office together regularly, that doesn't work anymore now in our hybrid and our remote environments. The sales processes that sales teams used pre-pandemic, those need to be reevaluated and redesigned to meet the evolving needs of customers and their buying habits and behaviors. And I think as AI and automation infiltrates the service side of organizations, there again, you need to be constantly rethinking and redesigning how the human to human interactions are evolving and changing, and specifically around the emotions that are attached to those conversations, and how are you equipping your frontline teams to have really connected and really effective conversations with customers when emotions are running so high in those conversations that are left behind that AI isn't able to address. So it's really just taking a look at the operating systems and models organizations have and redesigning and reevaluating them based on the way our world has evolved and will continue to evolve post-pandemic.
What's the best way to get a hold of you if somebody wants to explore possibilities of switching gears with their operating systems?
Yeah, the easiest way would be just to send me an email at paul@switchgear.ca. The other way, people can shoot me a text, 647-458-4225. It's on my LinkedIn page. It's out there in the ether already. So texting is probably the fastest way to get a response, but email works as well.
Perfect. And I'll make sure to put up your LinkedIn profile as well so people can check you out. I really appreciate this time that you shared with me today, Paul. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I can't wait till we have our next conversation.
Yeah, me too. And thanks for the invite. Really think what you're doing here is awesome. And I saw the conversation you had with Scott. It was lots of great insights there. If people haven't checked that one out, go check out the Scott Lanaway at Techno Brew. And look forward to doing this again in the future.
Absolutely.